Very well, my friends. Now we're going to continue with chapter 3, and in this chapter we're going to be taking a look at some more details that we're going to have here with our clothing. Now, one thing I'm going to do here, because it's becoming a little bit difficult for me to see what's going on, is I'm going to change this to a slightly lighter gray. There we go. And then we'll change it. I'm actually going to be updating this with proper materials like what we saw on the first chapter with substance materials. Again, you're free to go either into substance assets or substance 3D share to look for some options to see here on your element. Now, one more thing I'm going to change before we jump into thickness is the performance here. I'm going to change this to fast GPU. And the reason is we're now working with more and more patterns, so it's going to become a little bit more difficult to do so. I do want to make a very important warning here. GPU is only available if you have a 960 GPU from NVIDIA or higher. 960 is very old nowadays. So as long as you have an NVIDIA GPU, you're going to be able to use the tools that we have here with GPU. The reason is it uses the CUDA cores technology to get this to work very, very nicely. And yes, there will be some changes. You're going to see that things puff out a little bit more. Like the collision box might not be as tight, but one of the cool things is that this is definitely going to be a little bit faster. So as you can see, things are not lagging as much because the GPU can process things a little bit better. And at the very end, once we're finished and we like how things are looking, we're going to jump back and do a CPU to get the most like precise effect. You can see here that overlaps and things like that are not as great with GPU. Another thing we can do for this one, remember, these are small pieces of fabric. So a good idea is to, again, lower the particle count so that they can have enough memory to push through the surface. So now let's jump on to today's or this lesson's effect, which is thickness. Thickness is a property that we can add to our assets to make them look like they're actually thick. And they work especially well with things like this, like the belts and all of this, like leather bands and things like that. If you ask me from a professional perspective, how would I do belts, bags, and other things? I would probably do them in other softwares. You can do them in Marvelous, and there are certain types of bags or props that might benefit from being done here. But to be honest, those are one of those things that it's easier to just do in ZBrush, Blender, or Maya. So if you select, for instance, this belt right here, and we go down here to the properties, you're going to see that we have an option called thickness. So right here. This is the thickness of the element, and this is the thickness of the render. So if we set this to, I don't know, 3 millimeters or 5 millimeters, seems like a good number for a belt. We already have the thickness, but it's not going to show, okay? It's not going to be seen here. The reason is we need to go here and change this to thick texture surface, okay? If we change that to thick texture surface, as you can see, now we're actually going to be seeing the thickness of the garment. Keep in mind that thickness here works very similar to the solidify modifier inside of Blender, so it's not permanent. You can export it, and when you export it, it becomes permanent, but right now it's just a sort of like preview of how this thing is going to look. But it's a good way to give ourselves an idea of the final look of our elements. So we can do the same for this ones right here. Just go down here to the thickness rendering. These ones are going to be like 3 millimeters. And as you can see now, they're going to be a little bit thicker. Again, this overlaps that we're seeing right here, this is because of the GPU simulation. Remember that the GPU will not be as precise, and that's why we have a couple more overlaps. But if you can kind of like squint your eyes and imagine that eventually with the CPU, this thing is actually going to be on the outside, then we don't have to worry too much about this, okay? Again, at any point, you can just change this from GPU to normal, and it's going to give you a nicer effect. For now, we're just going to keep it like this. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So if you ever want to add some thickness to your garments, the easiest way to do it is just go over here, change the thickness, and that's it. Super brief thing to start the chapter 3. Now, in the next one, we're going to start dressing this character so that he looks more like a plague doctor and less like a ninja. So let's go.